A little backstory. I'm a 32-year-old male, above 6 foot, and 180 pounds. I'm recently going through a divorce, and my wife moved out of our house. I put our house up for sale, and I moved out into my own apartment as well. Not too long ago, I was physically assaulted by someone who was hired by my soon-to-be ex-wife, so I'm a little under the weather. I have 38 stitches, a concussion, and just got out of the hospital, so I am in no shape for much of anything right now. I have not forwarded my mail or changed my address to my new apartment for safety reasons. I have my mail going to a P.O. box instead, just to be secure. This is an important part of the story. I'm laying on my couch watching baseball, or waiting for the game to turn back on due to the rain. I'm flipping through channels, and my doorbell rings. It was almost 8 p.m. and I wasn't expecting any visitors, nor did any of my friends tell me they were stopping by. I ignored the doorbell and just turned the TV down, even though the volume was already extremely low. 5 minutes later and the doorbell rings again, so I got up and tiptoed to the door, because the floor creaks a little when you get close. I look out the peephole and I see a seemingly innocent, petite-looking woman in her mid-20s standing out there just waiting. I put the chain on and I open the door, and she immediately greets me by saying my name. I do not recognize her, so I respond, "And you are?" She held up a pie and said, "I'm your neighbor. I live in C2. My name is Alicia." Just for reference, C2 is across the hall and one over, so I can see the door to the apartment. It's just diagonally to the right across. I look at her door, I look back at her, and I hesitantly undo the chain. I take the pie and look down at it, and then I ask, "How do you know my name?" She let out a little giggle and answered, "One of your pieces of mail accidentally wound up in my box." I made a skeptical face, and there was a pause before I said, "I don't receive mail here." She wriggled an envelope in front of my face that was a personal letter addressed to me. Nothing professional like a bill or anything viable. There was no return address, it was just addressed to me with my name and my new address. I took it, then I told her I've never seen her there. I've met the guy who lives there, but I've never seen her. She giggled again, then said that she had just moved in and extended her hand to shake mine. I usually give a firm handshake because I don't believe in wussy handshakes, but this time, I have to admit, I did a pretty wimpy shake. She gave me a huge grin, raised the tone of her voice a little, and said, "It's nice to meet you." And when I didn't respond, she lowered the tone of her voice and said, "Neighbor." She looked me up and down for a moment, then looked me dead in the eye with a straight face. She waved, and then she went down the hall to the elevator instead of back to her supposed apartment. I threw the pie away and opened the letter. It is unsigned, and none of it is really relevant to me. The only thing really accurate is my name and new address. I'm a little creeped out, but wondering if I'm just paranoid. I wanted to share this story with you all. It's not mine, but my best friend Casey's. A couple of months ago, Casey moved back to her hometown after being away at college. Although she had been gone for a couple of years, she still had some friends around that would meet up with them for drinks or a movie in the first few weeks to catch up. One late evening, after hanging out at a restaurant, Casey said goodbye to her friend, walked back to her car, got in, and started it up. She was texting someone before she left when a car that was parked behind her turned its lights on. "That's odd," she thought, and looked over her shoulder. Although it was dark and the headlights were bright, She could just make out the emblem of a taxi sign on top of the car. Casey shrugged it off, figuring another person was getting a ride home from a taxi. She sent off her text and started to make the 25-minute drive home. Since it was late, there was absolutely no cars out. Casey took a right out of the parking lot onto a long stretch of straight road. Less than a minute later, she saw the taxi car turn onto the same road. She continued on this road for another 5 minutes, the taxi driving far behind her. She took a left turn, again onto a very straight, empty road that would take her the rest of the way home. The taxi also turned left. Casey drove the remaining 20-ish minutes to her neighborhood, occasionally eyeing the taxi cab that was off in the distance. This is when it gets weird. As Casey arrives at the entrance of her neighborhood, the taxi behind her speeds up almost to the point of hitting her bumper and turned into the neighborhood with her. She started freaking out now that she was sure this car was following her. She looped around a few connecting roads in the neighborhood, the taxi still in tow. Casey made the best decision of her life that night. She drove past her house, out the neighborhood, and down to the police station that was 2 minutes away from her house. The taxi followed her, up to the point she turned into the police station, then sped off into the night. She stayed there for 10 minutes and called her father to make sure he'd be up when she arrived back home, just in case the taxi driver came back. And they did. A month later. Casey had almost gotten over her fear of driving home after the whole ordeal and decided to meet up with her friend at the same restaurant. This time, she left earlier and didn't see anyone. But again, less than a minute into her drive home, she saw a car pull out of the parking lot and slowly drive behind her. A sinking feeling developed in her stomach. The same exact thing happened again. This time though, she didn't take any chances and drove straight through the neighborhood down to the police station. She turned in, expecting to see the taxi zoom by. Instead, it was a dark blue-green sedan. The person slowed down just enough for her to see their silhouette, then sped off straight into the night. Casey ended up reporting the suspicious activity to the police, but since she wasn't able to get the license plates, there wasn't much that could be done. Nothing similar has happened since she bought a new car, but she's very hesitant to drive home alone at night. It's probably fair to say Casey never wants to cross paths with them again.